After 20 years, we finally get confirmation of something we've been talking about on the channel for a long time, which is that Hiriluk saw Xebec sacrifice himself with a smile at God Valley. We'll break down exactly why we know this is the case, but it also sheds light on the idea that Garp and Xebec had a significant relationship, and Blackbeard might use Pudding to unlock a frozen Garp's memories in order to reveal this to the reader. This week's One Piece chapter 1145 gave us something rare and loaded with narrative weight, a scene featuring both Rocksteady Xebec and Prince Loki. Given how little we've seen of Rocks across the entire series, any appearance is pretty significant. There's a cool moment that reflects Whitebeard and Blackbeard's initial interaction, saying, "I didn't come all this way to take in a brat like you." But what really stands out here is the chapter number itself, 1145. It's a subtle but powerful callback to chapter 145, the iconic Drum Island moment where Dr. Hiriluk sacrifices himself. Hiriluk was in the West Blue during the same year as the God Valley incident, which is also in the West Blue. At the time, he was a thief, but after witnessing some unknown event, Hiriluk changed his ways. Additionally, Hiriluk tells us that what he'd witnessed somehow revealed a cure for a sickness of the heart, which is shown alongside Sakura imagery. In chapter 145, Hiriluk sacrifices himself willingly in an explosion that creates the image of a large Sakura tree, suggesting what Hiriluk saw was some form of self-sacrifice, strongly highlighted by Hiriluk's speech at the time about what it means to die. With the reveal of Rocks in 1145, it all but confirms what Hiriluk was discussing exactly 1000 chapters prior was Xebec at God Valley. If this is true, this tells us that Xebec sacrificed himself at the God Valley incident, contradicting the monster the world governments portrayed Xebec to be. This is further evidenced in 145 when Hiriluk says, "A monster is coming, please don't hurt him, he's my son." If you go and look back at that scene, that like the whole Chopper running towards them and a soldier says, "Look, there's a monster coming, he's not human, it's a monster, blah blah blah." You can just feel the Xebec vibes when you reread it.
People love to doom scroll, and I'm sure you fall into that group. So why haven't you downloaded Polybuzz yet? It's pretty fun chatting with anime characters when I'm bored. The app is smooth as butter and customization as easy as clicking the link in the description, and if that somehow gets boring, you can make your own characters to talk to. Maybe you've just binged Fast and the Furious and want to talk about family with Vin Diesel. I know I'm not the only one that talks to themselves, right? Right? Lately I've been trying to stay off my phone, but I'd be lying if I said Polybuzz hasn't made it a tad bit more difficult. Don't cheat yourself, treat yourself. Check out the link and use our code to unlock premium features. Now what are you waiting for? Gojo's waiting for you.
Yo, 久しぶり.
Oda has long used chapters as hidden markers or callbacks, and the similarity between 1145 and 145 feels pretty intentional. Chapter 145 focuses on misunderstood monsters, legacy, and parental love, a theme that may now reflect not just Chopper's story but something much bigger, the complicated and hidden relationship between Garp and Rocksteady Xebec. Notably, the chapter is called Carrying on His Will. We've covered the connections between Garp and Xebec a couple times before, and 1145 definitely adds to this, such as when Xebec calls Loki a brat, a phrase we've talked about in previous videos mostly being attributed to Garp in the One Piece series. A huge clue to all this is the events that took place at the Rocky Port incident. Essentially, we saw Garp take on a rogue pupil, and we also saw him sacrifice himself in order for Kobe to become the next hero of the Marines. Now, Garp got his epithet of Hero of the Marines after the God Valley incident, telling us something similar happened with Garp and someone else at God Valley. In other words, Garp was saved by someone at the God Valley incident. It's been alluded to a few times that Roger was not engaged in their fight, but instead was doing something else, highlighted in the imagery of Garp stood alone protecting the Marines. From this, we can presume it was Xebec that sacrificed himself to allow Garp to become the hero of the Marines. Okay, so in the quote above from Hiriluk in chapter 145, I mentioned Hiriluk calling Chopper his son. Does this mean Garp's is Rock's son? No. How do we know this? Well, we can examine the parallel with Hiriluk to glean a clearer image of what relationship Garp had with Xebec. A monster is coming, he's my son, please don't hurt him, is the only time that Hiriluk calls Chopper his son directly. Of course, we know he isn't actually a son because he's a reindeer, right? So there's not going to be some twist in the story where Chopper is actually Hiriluk's real child or anything like that, but there is something more to this. In previous videos we've looked at Q and how he's clearly tied to Hiriluk on a very deep level. In many ways the character contrasts Chopper as well, such as Q looking super old but only being in his 20s compared to Chopper, who is as old as reindeers can be but appears really childish. So let's take a little detour into the connections and check out the family tree. Hiriluk resembles Q. They're both introduced in Drum Island flashbacks. Their noses are oddly similar, they both use bombs, both are medical chemists. They both have makeup on their eyes, and yes, Q just so happens to be wearing 3/4 and a hat, showing off the same hairy legs we get from Hiriluk. We know Hiriluk had a sickness, and that Q was also born with a sickness. Finally, Q mentions luck in a few quotes, which might be a nod towards Hiriluk's name, which, by the way, we still don't have the full version of. So, Hiriluk could be Q's father, split up at birth. It could even be the case that their separation is some sort of love sickness, which Hiriluk describes as a sickness of the heart. If so, then sacrificing himself for his adopted son, Chopper, would surely be an appropriate cure, right? So in summary, we see Hiriluk, a likely parallel of Xebec, with a real son that's displaced and an adopted son that is from an entirely different species. So Chopper is Garp in this situation, Xebec's adopted son, cut from a completely different cloth from each other. Naturally, this begs the question, did Xebec have a real son? And we could speculate yes and think it's Dragon or Roger, but that's for you guys in the comments to just go to war over, because it would just be too much for this little video. So is Xebec perhaps Garp's mentor? It was Garp's pupil that defeated him at the Rocky Paw incident, so it could be the case. We might even get a connection between Ayakiji's line about not being able to use Haki and Xebec's ability, considering Xebec's strange, speculated ties to devil fruits. Garp went to Rocky Port to save an imprisoned Kobe, and we know there were prisoners at the God Valley incident, so we can assume that Xebec's sacrifice had something to do with these prisoners or freeing these prisoners. Roger escaped with Shanks inside a treasure chest on his ship. If we wanted to reach a little, we could speculate that Xebec and Garp worked together to prevent their ship from being destroyed. Some theorize Shanks as being Xebec's son, such as GT in our Discord server linked below. This would certainly fit the idea, so it is food for thought. So there is certainly evidence strongly implying Xebec sacrificed himself at the God Valley incident to perpetuate his dream through Garp, subsequently making Garp the hero of the Marines and demonizing Xebec as a monster. Furthermore, it appears the world government tricked Xebec into going to God Valley, from two main bits of evidence. Firstly, Hiriluk was tricked to going to the top of the Rockies, and also because Garp explicitly said that it's obvious that Xebec would go after whoever stole the pirate crown jewel. So to me, there's no doubt Xebec was not this all super evil monster the world government portrayed him as. There's currently some back and forth surrounding Xebec being a potential Joy Boy or Nika figure. There is certainly Joy Boy imagery surrounding Hiriluk, such as the sake he pours in his final moments, and the scene also evokes Nika when Hiriluk says, "Even if I'm gone, my dream will come true. The sick hearts of this country's citizens will also be saved." If Xebec does indeed have elements of Joy Boy and Nika, and was Garp's father figure or mentor, then it would mean that he has some pretty direct influence over Luffy, considering Garp was the one who trained Luffy. One more significance here is that one of the most important aspects of Joy Boy and Nika is they live on through memory, such as in stories and legends. Hiriluk's final words suggest he saw someone die, but that person lived on through someone's memory. Blackbeard's ship is called the Sabre of Xebec, so Teach certainly reveres Xebec's memory. Big Mom has memories of Carmel's past, indicating Carmel can influence Big Mom in some way through memory. Does this mean that Xebec secretly lives on through Blackbeard's memory? Well, Blackbeard has Pudding. This means he can use her abilities to look into a currently captured Garp's memories and discover more about the truth surrounding Xebec. This might give Blackbeard the insight he needs to stop LARPing as Xebec and finally become Xebec's successor, like a dark version of Garp. This would play into what we currently see in Elbath, with nightmares and a dark version of Nika, highlighting how perception is important in One Piece. In the end, chapter 1145 has just got me thinking about Oda's sort of questions surrounding what truly makes someone a monster, and more importantly, who gets to decide. Maybe Rox wasn't the villain history says he was. Maybe Garp didn't defeat an enemy but someone he cared about. And maybe Blackbeard, inheriting the legacy of Xebec, will be the one to uncover the truth and finally put an end to Xebec's cycle. Anywho, that's all for today. Make sure you're subbed, and if you made it this far, you've just won one of the Rockies from Drum Island. So let me know where you want that delivered, and I'll get someone to pour that over ASAP. Take your dog for a walk, enjoy spring, and toodle pipsqueak.